And one thing that I wish every clinician who was in this space is our patients are incredibly vulnerable as they're getting their ketamine infusion. They're entering the unknown. Their eyes are closed. They're reclined back in that zero gravity chair. And they really have to put a lot of trust in the provider. So again, it's really an honor and a privilege to be with patients in this space. But no, it's very vulnerable. And if you can understand how vulnerable someone is in that state as they're receiving ketamine and really optimize how you are being, I think that plays a crucial role in feeling safe for the patients.
3, 2, 1, liftoff.
Welcome to the Ketamine Startup podcast. This is where we talk about how to open up a ketamine infusion clinic, marketing it, and more. This episode comes from one of our mastermind sessions with our students from our signature course, Ketamine Startup 101, where we share the 4 things to let your ketamine patients know to expect during a ketamine infusion. In this episode, we shared insights, lessons, and stories from running our own clinic since 2018 and teaching others how to open their own clinic and marketing since 2020. We had a great time with this topic, and we hope you enjoy it too. So let's dive in.
4 things to let your ketamine patients know to expect during an infusion.
And this topic can seem like maybe kind of small or kind of obvious to you because you see infusions all the time. You provide the therapy all the time. But for your patients, and especially those first timers, it's new and it's unexpected. And there are varying amounts of experience that your patients will come in with altered states of consciousness. And, there's something about a patient that knows more about what to expect and that you have signaled and communicated that you know what you're anticipating their needs and questions. That's very powerful. So that's why we want to take some time today to talk in particular about the what to expect during an infusion and why this matters. The therapeutic experience, and this is separate from the therapeutic relationship. I just want to be clear about that. Is when the therapeutic experience starts, it doesn't start when they just sat in the chair and they have the IV and the ketamine's going through into their body. No, it's the moment they decide, yes, this is what I'm doing, or they've put their deposit down, or they finished the consultation, and something has switched inside of them, and they're like, yep, I'm doing this. That experience is already starting. That relationship of trust that they have in not only you, but in the treatment itself begins. And so setting some clear expectations of what to expect during the treatment and not just, you're first going to come into our clinic, you're going to get weighed, but actually the treatment itself. And so preparing patients are more likely to have a meaningful experience because they can lower some of that anxiety, and so they can stay committed to being treated and feeling healthy and happy about this process. And that's why we want to dive into 4 things in particular. And, we've noticed that there's varying preparations from clinic to clinic. So have you noticed anything that, like, from other patients when they've come from other clinics to ours, or patients that are just coming in a little more anxious, and how that is affected treatments?
Yeah, I think the real key that you're touching upon is a word called pre-framing. So we know about this concept, reframe. So something happens and I'm going to reframe my mindset around it. But pre-frame is another powerful tool where you're going to let them know what to expect. So going to your question, Kim, about, hey, what have I noticed for patients is if they haven't done the research and they don't have prior psychedelic experiences, it can be intense and overwhelming. There is one patient I can think of specifically who was coming in for chronic pain, and he had a history of new daily persistent headaches. And accordingly, we're doing a longer infusion and, higher doses for the pain. And he was very naive psychedelically to these non-ordinary states of consciousness. And for him, he noticed that it was very intense. There was a sense of his ego dissolving. He didn't know whether he was alive, and he thought it was very challenging. And because they didn't know what to expect, and they didn't, although I had sent him the links, I guess this person had not clicked on those links about what to expect. So it was pretty scary for them. Now, fortunately, one of the things that we suggest is on that first infusion is to keep the dose lower. So before you titrate the dose, you want to start it at the low dose. And I even let them know, I pre-frame to the patients. On the first session, we're going to go a lower dose and keep it really easy. We don't want you to have a 10 out of 10 type of experience, maybe a 5, maybe a 6, something that you get used to. And the metaphor that I use is if someone's going scuba diving, on their first scuba dive, you're not going to go down to 1,000 feet or 100 feet, 200 feet. You're going to keep it easy, maybe 10 feet, maybe 20 feet of depth. And then once they get used to that sensation, then you can go deeper on the subsequent dives of ketamine.
All right, so let's jump into that. First thing you want to share with your patient to expect during that infusion, especially for those first ones. And it's feeling nervous is normal. We need to acknowledge the nerves, because it's completely normal, especially for first time treatments ever, or even if they've had a different provider, a different doctor providing them treatments. This is the first time they're actually getting that treatment with you. Remember, the treatment is not just the ketamine. It is you, your staff, it's the set and setting, and the ketamine. So there's going to be some nerves. They're not going to know how they're going to respond. And how are you going to respond to them when they don't know how they're going to respond? As Sam had mentioned with his story, like there's varying amounts of individuals that have had experience with non-ordinary states of consciousness. So reassuring them that nervous is normal and maybe even pre-framing it, as Sam had mentioned, can be very powerful. And, to acknowledge not only the nerves, but to say, hey, we're here, like in our clinic at least, we have continuous vital sign monitoring. We have somebody always physically in the room with them. And so that we tell them that your nerves are normal and we're here. And since we do infusions, if the dose, even though it's low for the first treatment, if it's too much, we can stop. So letting them know what you can do to address their nerves or their concerns that are feeding those nerves can be very powerful.
And what I love about this is that since you know now that this can occur, like having your presence can be really the crucial component. Ketamine is a non-specific mental amplifier. And so although they may have a bit of anxiety, you can be that presence for them to kind of help regulate their sympathetic nervous system. So this is really the key, telling them that feeling nervous, completely normal. Again, reminding them, yep, you can stop the infusion at any time because it's done IV. It's not a huge bolus. It's a slow, continuous infusion. And letting them know, like, hey, in the back of your mind, we can stop it at any time can be quite reassuring.
Is there any words that you use or ways of being, or like when you can tell somebody is pretty nervous?
Yeah, I think regulating my breath and really slowing it down can be key. We have a child, she's 5 years old now, and I'm reading a ton of like parenting books and audiobooks and podcasts about parenting. And in a way, we can help regulate our child's nervous system by being calm around them. Now, with our patients, we're not their parent, of course, but the presence of you as kind of an authority figure, you're wearing the white coat, you're, the physician or clinician there, like your way of being can help regulate their nervous system, similarly to how a parent can help regulate the child's nervous system. So this is really the key of just letting them know, again, that pre-framing concept. Yep, nervousness is normal. And let me share a metaphor that I tell all of our patients. And I say, hey, you might be feeling nervous. And as a metaphor, imagine that you went to the swimming pool and there's a diving board. Let's say it's like 10 feet above the swimming pool. Well, you've seen hundreds of people jump off that diving board into the swimming pool and they're fine. But even as you walk up that ladder, you're going to feel that nervousness, and you're on the diving board, you're feeling it bounce and jiggle underneath of your feet. Like there's going to be a little bit of nervousness. So that's okay. And that's expected. However, once they do take the leap and the jump and it's safe, there's lifeguards present, people are watching them, like they're going to feel really good about it. And so once they get over that first jump or dive into the swimming pool, the rest of them actually become quite easy. And a lot of our patients will report, oh yeah, the first one, a little bit nervousness, but the second, third, fourth, fifth, sixth, super smooth, super, super easy. And then we can titrate the dose up with each infusion.
Before we move on, I just want to acknowledge that, or point out that pointing out to the patient about the steps that you take to make the environment, the setting very calm, having music, soft lighting, having that staff member in the room. These are intentional actions and things that your clinic does to support them. So you may do that because you think that's just a good idea. It's on your, this is what you value. This is what you would want if your loved one was getting it. But actually stating it and showing them, being an intentional, like pointing it out, shows that you're anticipating that we know nerves happen. So it's not just stating all these things, but by pointing these things out, it's the actions of it. So number 2, the thing you want to point out and for them to expect during the infusion is they may see, feel, or realize big things. This is that non-ordinary state of consciousness or psychedelic experience. And, as you may already know, they can have physical, emotional changes. They can have downloads, dreamlike imagery, all these different things. And so letting them know that that can happen. Some have no idea, or they have had treatments elsewhere where they were given other medications, benzos or stuff like that, that would help them kind of not experience that as much or dampen it. So just giving them the heads up is very powerful for them. And reassuring them, again, this is normal and is part of the therapeutic process, not necessarily a sign of something wrong.
Now, the other key thing is to let them know that once the infusion ends, that these non-ordinary states of consciousness will also end. I don't know if you've ever seen the movie Interstellar, but there's this part where Matthew McConaughey is stuck in this dimension and he's literally like, I can't get out. Some patients may actually feel that way during their ketamine infusion, like, hey, this is kind of cool. I'm out here. Oh, but what if I can never leave? And so letting them know that no matter what happens, they're always going to be able to come out of that state. And again, they have the option to request stopping the infusion and they can always get out of it. It takes 5, 10, 15 minutes to metabolize and come back. But yeah, it's always going to come back to a normal state. And as Kim had mentioned, as we measure their vital signs and optimize the set and the setting, that is really letting them know that they can feel safe, they can feel comfortable. One of the biggest compliments that we get at our clinic is, hey, I felt so safe during the infusion here. Like, I've never felt this safe. And that's really one of the key things is a lot of our patients with whether it's depression or anxiety or PTSD in particular, like this lack of safety. And if you can provide that for them, that's so huge and meaningful. Now, the other thing I want to bring up is sometimes they will have these visions or mystical type of experiences and let them know that they're not random, but they're quite meaningful, even if they're hard to explain. And a lot of people will use the word ineffable, i.e., not able to put into words. But what we want to do is help them create a meaning. There's a book called Man's Search for Meaning by Viktor Frankl, and he says humans are meaning-making machines. So that's one of the things with integration is helping them make a meaning from their experience and really having the patients come to their own conclusions of what this could mean, along with a little bit of coaching from you or from a psychotherapist or an integration coach, helping them make a meaning. And a lot of times the patients will come up with their own meanings, and helping them grasp that and really download that into their daily life can be key.
Do you think over the course of having been practicing ketamine therapy, more patients are coming in knowing these things? Like this isn't something that you have to prompt as much, but compared to when we first started out and stuff?
Yeah, it's a good question because when, we started 7 years ago, a lot of patients, ketamine was not heard of. It was brand new. But now there's a lot of like trip reports on whether it's Reddit or Arrowwood. And so people are doing their research. There's a ton of news articles. So people are now more familiar with these type of experiences and they expect that that's going to occur. So that's really helpful actually in that because there is more media coverage, people know about what it's going to be like. Although they'll truly never know this metaphor. And I'm all about metaphors, as you can probably imagine. But it's like, yeah, someone can tell you about a great restaurant and their best burger. But if you don't personally have that burger, like their description is going to be inadequate until you personally experience it or the person personally experiences that ketamine infusion.
Hey listeners, this is Kim, and I just want to acknowledge that you're here for a reason. Maybe you're stuck in a cycle of long shifts, feeling a little burnt out. and wondering if there's any other way to practice medicine, especially on your own terms. We've been there, and that's exactly why we created this free checklist, your step-by-step roadmap to starting a ketamine clinic without those costly mistakes. Grab your copy now at www.ketaminestartup.com/checklist. It's completely free because we want you to succeed, not struggle. And hey, if you're driving or mid-workout, don't sweat it. Just check out the show notes for the link when you're ready. And again, that's www.ketaminestartup.com/checklist. Now let's get back to the episode. Number 3, physical sensations may happen. So that not only are they going to have these experiences within their mind and spirit, but also they'll feel things. The lightheadedness, maybe some dizziness. They may feel a little bit nauseous during or even after the treatment. And this can vary very much on how much the dose is, how they were going into the treatment, not only mentally, but physically. And so letting them know that you have means to address any physical issues. I think the anxiety comes from, and speaking as a individual going to see any doctor, when you're like, okay, am I not feeling good because I'm nervous, or am I not feeling good because there's actually something physically wrong with me? And so letting them know that you have means to address that, whether that means, pre-treat with Zofran or giving Zofran after, and that you have all these different means of addressing the physical sensations or any of those physical issues that can occur. Do you have any go-to ways that you address this, or do patients even, are they concerned about the physical versus the mental, or?
Yeah, there's definitely some physical reactions that can occur, specifically nausea and headaches and dizziness, as Kim had mentioned. So again, we have that IV in place, meaning we can give them a little bit of IV Zofran, IV Toradol. We have a ton of options. And another trick of the trade is for, in particular, dizziness, is if I know that a person has that, or they're at an increased risk of it, maybe they're just like easily motion sick, for example, then you can even give them a bit of meclizine, and literally just over the counter, get it on Amazon, buy some meclizine, also known as antivert, and, pre-treat them. And that'll really help the dizziness. So again, if you let the patients know some of these side effects physically that can occur, and let them know that you have options available for it, that can be incredibly reassuring for them. And on the first one, you kind of don't know what physical sensations they're going to have. And so after the first session, you ask them, hey, did you have headaches? Did you have nausea? And then if they report yes, then you can pre-treat them with Zofran, Toradol, etc. on their subsequent infusions.
And the fourth thing to mention to them that they can expect during an infusion is emotional releases are possible. So this is kind of building up, especially from the number 1 and number 2 even, that sometimes there's these emotions that are suppressed, that have been pushed down for years. And so tears, anger, grief, all these emotions that have been pushed down, that have been depressed, can come out. And I think the big thing is to normalize it. Because, many people, they're coming in being, from childhood being told, tears are not okay. Tough it up, wipe those tears, go do it another time. And that another time never comes. And then next thing you know, it's 20, 30, 40 years. And this is the first time they've cried in a very long time. And that it's, this is a safe place to have these tears. And not only is it a safe place, it's encouraged and it's totally okay. And we welcome it and it's wonderful. And that everyone in the environment that they're getting the treatment is there to support and hold space for them. And that no matter what comes up, whatever emotion, whatever physical response even, you and your staff are prepared to handle them.
Yeah, it makes me think of patients who, when I first started, there was one patient who was just crying throughout the entire infusion. So for 40 minutes, we're just hearing her sob. And I was like, oh my God, is something wrong? What's going on? And after the session, she told me that for 20 years, she had not cried one tear. All of those tears had been pent up like water behind a waterfall. And finally, the ketamine seemed to release that dam and it was just flowing. And I heard this quote, what soap is to the body, tears are to the soul. And so it was incredibly cathartic for her. And so just be aware that during the ketamine infusions, your patients may cry, They may get angry. They may laugh. And all of that is good. And we just want to support them and say, hey, there's no right way or wrong way to do it. But whatever emotion is there, to let it out. If you think about the word emotions, emotion, energy and motion. And a lot of times, emotions can get stuck. And what we want to do is help release them, really to get to the root of their issues.
We've been talking about staff earlier. You know, how, I don't know how I actually asked this question, but rather we know you're on board with holding this container for your patients' emotions and the things they can experience. How do you go about training, or does it even start at the level of who you're hiring to that are able to handle those emotions? Because sometimes it can bring up emotions for the staff, emotions for the individuals. They're holding space for them. So how do you navigate that?
Yeah, one of the key questions I ask during the interview of our assistants and nurses and any staff we hire is like letting them know some of these patients may have emotional experiences. How do you deal with that, or how comfortable do you feel with that? And so getting a sense. I don't I think the key really is with hiring the staff, like getting the right people on board. And so some people are really just emotionally intelligent, and it's definitely a skill, but also some people are just naturals at it. And so hiring those people who are naturals at it, and you'll be able to tell just by your gut sense, just by talking with them. Hey, are they like naturally emotionally intelligent? Do they have the ability to sit and hold space for them? And that's really a skill, but also it can be trained, but also I think there is a natural component to it. Now, I do want to address this other question, like, let's say in real time as this is occurring, how do we support them? Well, one small, simple thing is just holding someone's hand, literally just holding their hand. You may recall that old study with the rhesus monkeys where they were given it was kind of a sad scientific study, but they took these monkeys and they were babies, and they either gave them a hard metal mother replica with milk, so that's their source of nutrition, or they were given a kind of a stuffed animal that looked like a rhesus monkey mom, but without any milk. And what they found was that the baby monkey had options and access to both. And they would go to the hard metal one to get the milk, but then immediately after, they would go to that soft replica of the mother monkey. So the bottom line is that humans, we really need touch and regulation, and having that soft, fuzzy space can be comfortable. And one of the key hacks you can do is just get them a kind of a blanket, right? That's kind of that fuzzy replica of a rhesus monkey mom, is just giving them something fuzzy, warm to hold on to. And it could be as simple as just a blanket or even just holding their hand.
And I think that brings up the point, or the concept of a safe space, that, it's not just you're going to be getting the treatment in a place that will make sure you stay alive and physically well, but that it is emotionally a safe place as well. And that you are trained and you train those around you, and you have a culture of having this emotional safety where you value emotional intelligence, and that one of the values that you have, and one of the motivating factors or whatever, is that being present is key, and that presence is part of that emotional safety. And that presence is also acknowledging to the patients that they are not alone. That they are actually, the staff is actually honored to be holding space. Like, it's not only, it's kind of if you're used to traditional healthcare model, you're there you can provide a service to help a person get better. You put that dislocated shoulder back in place. A person was not well, and now they are. But there's actually something very beautiful that's you're very lucky as a healthcare provider, as a physician, to actually witness and provide that space and to watch that transformation. It's like seeing that caterpillar turn into the chrysalis and then the butterfly emerging. Like, there is something very honorable and beautiful about that. And your presence acknowledges that, especially when you're truly present. I think that presence is like the biggest key for setting. And, you're not just the provider. You're not the person there just to keep them alive, but you're there to guide them through this transformation.
Yeah, and it can even happen like outside of the ketamine clinic setting. I As you were talking, Kim, I was thinking about a patient I saw in the emergency department, and he was having a STEMI, so ST elevation MI. And I remember sitting with him, and he was conscious but in a lot of pain. And we're, getting the EKG, activating the cath lab, etc. But there's a little bit of a waiting time as we're doing all this process. So I remember just standing there right next to the gurney, talking with him, helping him breathe, telling the nurse, "Hey, get those pain meds, get the nitro, start the heparin drip, all the stuff that we needed to do." But letting him know that, hey, I'm the doctor, I'm making the diagnoses, we're going to get the treatment, but we're also facilitating this healing process. And he's beginning the healing process. He hasn't had his cath yet and probably a stent. But I remember him telling me, like, "Hey, doctor, I'm so grateful you're here with me." Now, that same concept applies to the ketamine space. They are going through a transformational experience. And when you're able to sit with them and be present with them and help them regulate their emotions by your presence, that's going to be incredibly therapeutic. That leads me to, this question, like, are there any phrases or practices that I found particularly helpful in preparing the patients? Is communication. And they say that communication, it's like 90% is body language and another, 8% is tone, how you're speaking, the rate. So really being conscious of, like, how fast am I speaking? What is my tone? There's a great book by Chris Voss, and I'm blanking on the title of the book, but one of the things he talks about is like negotiations. And how does he get people who are in a hostage situation and kind of negotiating with that hostage taker? And he talks about something called the late night DJ voice. So that's a very smooth, calm, mellow type of voice. And you can actually bring that into your practice where you're talking to your patients in a smooth, late night DJ voice. And that tone can be incredibly helpful, as well as your body language. Are you going to sit with your arms crossed and your legs crossed and leaning way back? Or are you going to sit with your arms open, looking at them, inviting them to speak and share? So being cognizant, I think, is really the key. And one thing that I wish every clinician who was in this space is, our patients are incredibly vulnerable as they're getting their ketamine infusion. They're entering the unknown. Their eyes are closed. They're reclined back in that zero gravity chair. And they really have to put a lot of trust in the provider. So again, it's really an honor and a privilege to be with patients in this space, but no, it's very vulnerable. And if you can understand how vulnerable someone is in that state as they're receiving ketamine and really optimize how you are being, I think that plays a crucial role in feeling safe for the patients.
Never split the difference.
Thank you.
Is that what I think that's the title? I'm like 90% sure that's the title of the Chris Voss book. So let's make this practical. So tips to make this easier in your clinic, educating and communicating. And so one of the topics here we want to talk about is train your team to use consistent language. I think not a consistency of language alone, but that to have them be trained to anticipate, acknowledge concerns or questions that may come up. And that could be in the form of creating like a pre-infusion checklist. You're going to have checklists to, make sure that is the IV placed, have we checked their blood pressure, have gotten their weight, all of that. But also acknowledging, making sure that do we have the setting all set up so that they can feel emotionally safe and address any anxiety. So like a pre-flight checklist, if you will. Remember to speak to any nervousness. And sometimes it may not be just blatantly saying, hey, if you're nervous, it's okay. We acknowledge it. It's normal. But to actually just see, are you getting be with the patient, whether that's, on that consultation call or on the consultation when they come in or whatever it may be, get a sense. Are they feeling anxious? Are they putting out anxious energy? And speak to that. Speak to whatever they're presenting with. You got to repeat things often. So, Sam, acknowledge always. I'm here to help with all these paperwork and stuff. When we created our clinic, we are very clear about these non-ordinary states, these psychedelic states. We have videos on this. We have blogs. We direct potential patients and patients that have signed up And yet, as Sam had pointed out, a patient still came in and was like, what was that? So repeat it often. And then again, all about that set and setting, design your space to help them feel emotionally safe. And that also includes your emotional presence as well. So some key takeaways, preparation matters. It starts before they're even sitting in the chair getting the treatment. You want to normalize nerves, any visuals they may experience, any physical side effects or emotions, and your tone, your presence, whether you use that late night DJ voice or not. If you are, if your head is in the clouds or you're worried about the stocks and you're not truly listening to what they're saying, that the patient will know. And, just again, make that checklist, have those things to consider. So your next steps, whether you are actively practicing ketamine therapy or you're about to open, review your patient prep workflow. Where can it improve? Do you even prepare them besides the classic physical, biological sense? They know to anticipate these emotional releases. Number 2, maybe update or create materials to include the points that we discussed today. And then finally, training your team to deliver this message of emotional safety and consistency. That's from the person that first takes calls, whoever's answering the phone, to the front desk, to your nurses or medical assistants, to the provider themselves. So just having everyone along the chain, that any patient point of contact knows that these are things that we want to share and express with your patients. We hope this episode provided you with a lot of information to help you better educate and anticipate the needs and expectations of your patients during ketamine therapy. If you enjoyed our podcast, we would love it if you would subscribe to our podcast on the platform of your choice. And if you haven't already, we'd appreciate it if you left a review, as this will help us reach more entrepreneurial medical professionals like you. Thank you again for tuning in, and we'll see you in the next episode.